Therapy Chat Podcast, episode 73. Thanks to Lesley University for sponsoring today's episode. Listen with compassion and help others transform their lives. This is what you'll do in Lesley University's mental health counseling programs. Explore creativity and healing. Examine the human condition from multiple angles. Apply a social justice lens to mental health care. You bring your ability to care with purpose. Lesley University will help you achieve your goals. Discover master's and PhD programs at lesley.edu/mental-health.
This is the Therapy Chat Podcast. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. And now, here's Laura Reagan, LCSW-C, with today's episode.
Hi, welcome back to Therapy Chat. I'm your host, Laura Reagan, LCSW-C. So glad to be back with you again. And today I have an interview with Xanthia Johnson, who is a therapist in Washington, D.C., owner of a practice called Urban Playology. She has a beautiful way with words and metaphor, and she talks about her work with play therapy, Expressive Arts, and other experiential practices, and how she creates a safe space for her clients to bring all the parts of themselves. I like how Xanthia really intentionally and deliberately focuses on creating that safe space as a main priority of the therapy process and the therapeutic relationship. So you're going to want to listen in to hear how she describes what she does and how she does it. And she gives some techniques and tips for therapists. So let's get started. Hi, welcome back to Therapy Chat. Today I have a very special interview to share with you. My guest is Xanthia Johnson of Urban Playology, who is a supreme embrace guru. Xanthia, thank you so much for being on Therapy Chat today.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura.
I'm really excited for people to hear more about you. So why don't we just start off by you telling our listeners more about yourself and your work?
Okay, that sounds good. Well, I am so honored to be able to provide a safe haven and home to a diverse group, a super diverse group of open outliers, courageous couples, and unique families that make their way to Urban Playology, my practice, which is located in Washington, D.C. in DuPont Circle. And it's been such an honor to finally be able to settle into the work that I'm doing and to be doing the work that I really love with the people that I really love working with. So it's been such a wonderful experience so far.
Yeah, so what are some of the ways that you work with people? What makes you a supreme embrace guru?
Thanks so much for asking. I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about this. Really, I work very, very intently and very intentionally to make sure that I'm creating a supreme embrace experience, that I'm offering that up to my clients and to the folks that make their way to Urban Playology. And so for me, what that means is this is a completely safe place for them to be exactly who they are and to bring all the parts of themselves so that all the parts of themselves can actually be embraced. I used to have I still have a mentor who hails from Lebanon, and she used to say, if there isn't one person who knows all there is to know about you, how then will you ever know how truly loved and how unconditionally loved and accepted that you really are?
Yeah, because we show people what we think they want to see. So that safe space concept is so important in therapy. Well, before we talk about that in more depth, which I hope we will, but I really love for people to hear about some of the ways you do therapy, some of the types of things you do, because your practice is called Urban Playology, and I think that's very intriguing to know what that is and what that means.
Yes. Well, urban playology is my brainchild, and it comes from my journey. It really represents my journey of coming to myself in my clinical practice, of recognizing that I so enamored with DC's children and families, and I'm also a play therapist who also uses expressive arts in my work with families, young people, and adults. And so I really needed a name to represent that heartbeat experience that I'm offering, the heartbeat experience that I walk with and carry with me in all my interactions with clients. And so it's almost hard to explain. And I think about it a lot, like, how do I explain the magic that's happening in my office? How do I explain what a person looks like when they come in, their shoulders bent over and downtrodden and beaten up by life, and what it's like to see them more upright and making eye contact and ready to go back out into the world and try it again? How do I describe what some folks get it, more folks than not get it?
So, Xanthia, what comes to mind for me when you talk about that, how it's really hard to put into words what you do in your practice? I have felt that way before, too. And I think when our work is more experiential and it's something that's felt and sensed more than spoken, it's really hard to access the words and verbally to describe it.
Mm-hmm. And especially like with play therapy, with the toys being the words for the young people, you learn about how to interpret and how to be present for that process. And so, I acknowledge that I am a work in progress too, as I spread the word about my wonderful practice. I'm biased. I know that, but I am just, over the moon about this. I speak in metaphor a lot, if you haven't already picked that up. So
I love it. The way you speak is very beautiful and different. And just even calling yourself a supreme embrace guru and naming your practice Urban Playology, it's very different. It's kind of poetic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Let me know I'm on the right track.
So let's talk a bit more now about that concept of creating a space where your clients can show up exactly with all of their parts as they truly are. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes people don't even know what parts they're hiding from themselves. Mm-hmm. I know that's true for me. I think it's true for everybody. So how do you create that space?
I think that's a great question, Laura. And I think it really starts with the therapist. It's about creating a safe space within yourself. And one of the exercises I do, and sometimes in consultation with other, novice therapists or other folks who are under my supervision, I'll say, let's come up with a few words to describe you. And I call this the word soup exercise. And it's really great because what word soup does is it allows you to really begin to unearth all these thoughts and ideas that you have about who you are in the world. And 9 times out of 10, for most therapists, they are able to extrapolate about at least 2 or 3 qualities or attributes that they feel like really resonate and really represent who they are, or even who they're aspiring to be more so. And so this is an exercise that I strongly suggest that therapists do every now and again, to check in with yourself, to check in with your psyche, to check in with your soul about how you're doing, because guess what? Your clients can sense, they can sense what work you're doing. And I think it's part of creating that safe place. I think it's been absolutely quintessential to my practice. So the first step, I think, is to check in with yourself about who you are and your own story.
So I think you're talking about how the therapist is doing in the moment and more broadly.
That's right.
We want to believe that we can take ourselves out of it, but I don't believe that anymore. I don't believe that you can just be a blank slate. I think that the self of the therapist is there, and it's part of what is making the change happen.
That is right. That is right. And that has definitely been my experience, so far with clients. And I just think for me, it really began with this true declaration, like, I want to be the kind of therapist that I would want to see,
Exactly.
I would want to feel like I could say whatever I needed to say and to be fully embraced, not just tolerated.
Exactly. Thank you.
Tolerance and embrace. I don't want to be tolerated. I want to be embraced. And so making sure that I'm being the change, that's, part of my way of being the change I want to see in the world is by being the therapist that I want to be.
That I want to go to in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You must be the therapist that you want to see in the world.
That's right. That's right.
One of my favorite quotes with a twist.
Yep. It should be a t-shirt.
Hey, a little side gig for you and me. We can start making t-shirts.
We would do it. Let's do it.
So an important part of making that safe space is for the therapist to be self-aware, checked in with what we are feeling, how grounded we are.
How we're seeing ourselves and what attributes that do we see in ourselves. I think when you do that, it makes way for the client to be able to see themselves in a nuanced way. I think the other part of it, too, is one of the things my mentor says is, if you want to learn the language, you have to immerse yourself in the culture. So you have to be able to be around and to create a community of colleagues who are doing that. And I think that can be challenging. I know in private practice, which can be isolating at times, I think it can be tough, but making sure that you are bringing those conversations about how you're creating a safe place to your interactions with your colleagues, to your discussions, to your staff meetings, to your clinical supervision. I know it was very helpful for me, and it's been so helpful for me to have a clinical supervisor who specializes, in safe space and cultural awareness and cultural competency, so that I'm always being invited to be my best therapist self in the work and to look at things through a lens that creates that safe place for the client.
I like what you're saying, and I think I know what you mean, but I'd like to have it be a little more explicit if we can make sure that first that I'm getting it and that people who are listening are getting what you're saying too. Can you give an example or maybe what it looks like when you are and what it looks like when you're not doing what your mentor suggested?
Sure. I mean, I think Brene Brown says that one of the main reasons, the number one reason that folks do not return to therapy is empathic failure, right?
Mm.
Okay. And so at the end of the day, that's what it typically is. And so I think, looking at these instances where there were abrupt, terminations or abrupt transitions out of the therapy work, kind of going back, rewinding the tape a little bit to see, what happened, and to glance but not stare, to glance and take a look at your repertoire of work in those moments, and to see where you were, flourishing, and then where were your growing edges in the work. And I would say that's the case with all of your clients, even in instances where you felt like treatment went really well and it was a positive experience. I always can stand to survey that And I also too think that clients give you, clients speak with their feet. Okay. And so they give you a lot of data, a lot of rich information about how they're experiencing it. So if this person's body language is closed, they're not making eye contact anymore, their body is still there, you can always take a moment to check in. Wait a minute. I'm noticing some things, and I want to give you an opportunity to speak to where you are right now, and to let them claim their seat in the room more in those moments. To say, I don't really like what you're saying. Or, I don't understand what you're saying. That really resonates with me. A lot of folks that come to my therapy practice have already been to therapists, and it's so interesting to hear the feedback that they have about other therapists, because they'll say things like, well, the therapist didn't really listen to me. Or I felt like I was competing for my own therapy, competing with the therapist for my own therapy. I didn't really feel like I could say, I'm having these feelings, or I feel this way with the therapist. And, so I want this, I want our conversation to be an invitation for therapists to kind of think about, how would you know with different clients, like how well you're doing? I think soliciting direct feedback is an important part of the process, Laura, but I also too think that observing what you're seeing in them in real time is an important part of the process as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of empathic attunement and attachment, When there's a misattunement, the client may feel like, oh, they don't get me. I knew it.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody gets me. I'm too screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're, I'm sure we've all been a client at some point. It's so vulnerable to say, I've got a problem that is beyond what I know how to handle, or the way I feel is just too confusing for me, and I need somebody to help guide me to figuring out how to get to the next point. And when we're supposed to be the expert and we're just talking at them and they're feeling like, I don't even know what they're talking about, the client's thinking that.
Yeah, I mean, am always thinking about how to refine the collaborative experience that clients are having in the work with me. And I think that collaboration is, you are going to be the greatest expert at your own life.
Mm-hmm.
I'll even have clients sometimes say, well, Xanthia, give me some advice. What do you think I should do? What should I do? And, I reflect back to them. You're wondering what I think you should do. And you're in this space where you're seeking answers. You want an answer. And for me, it also, too, it requires that I believe in them to be able to unearth these soulful truths for themselves. And so I let them know, I'm here to be a support to you, and I cannot give you advice. That's not my role. Even when it's tempting, even when I think I might have a really great idea. Oh, here's what you should do, girlfriend. This is what you need to do now. Try this. Let me know how it goes. Even in those moments, checking in with myself to be able to say, listen, this is their process. And if you believe in them, there's no question about your approach, here. And it should be the one that you've been using it that's been working well. Some clients really don't like that. They really want you to tell them what to do. And so then you have a conversation about that, about the discomfort of being in an interchange where you feel like you want somebody to give you advice. Now guarding issues around, life or death kind of situations where you do need to be more directive and more actionable, excluding those scenarios. I have never had a situation where I've created this safe place and a client, I've worked with young people as young as 2 years old who didn't find their way into the truth, right? For themselves.
It's more like that fantasy that they didn't have the power all along was given in the way.
That's right. There you go. That's exactly right. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah, I was thinking when you were talking about something you said earlier, because I can't quite put my finger on it, but when we, especially as new therapists, are starting out and we're so worried about what to say next, and don't want to look like we don't know what we're doing, and how if you could just sit back and kind of go with what's happening, trust yourself, trust the process. It's so much more empowering for the person sitting on the other side of the therapy relationship.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I remember those days, I'm 15 years in now, and I remember sitting there and kind of just wanting to do a good job, and that perfectionism will kick in, won't it? And it can be such a distraction. And I think that's why the clinical supervision with somebody who's really trained, who you really trust, who believes in you more so than anything, I think that can really help in situations like what you described.
Yeah, because as a therapist, if we don't believe and trust that the person has within them the resources to answer the question, and we are taking on the responsibility that it's up to us to make the situation better, that's also extremely draining and exhausting for the therapist to be putting that pressure on themselves to solve all these problems, and that's, I think, that typically goes back to family of origin dynamics
that
draw us all into this work. Maybe not you, but me and everyone else.
Right. I mean, yeah, we definitely come by way of our profession nobly, as I say. And yeah, it is a big responsibility to take on more of the client's experience than is going to be helpful to them.
I had an experience where someone was often coming in and they would tell me something, and then they would say, "What is that? Why do I do that? What's that about?" And I would think, "Oh, I can see what it's about." And I would say, "Well, sometimes it might relate to something." I would say something kind of vague to give them like a tip. But then one time I was like, "Why are you answering that? What you need to do is ask them what they think." And I did that, and the person told me exactly what it was about. And it was like, "Oh, look, you did know."
Wow.
And they were feeling disempowered, but I was playing into that when I was saying, "Oh, yeah, I know what it is, and you don't know. You're asking me. Let me make myself feel better by telling you the answer." But really, I had to step back and say, I bet this person already knows this. I've seen how smart and resourceful this person is. But why would I believe that they actually don't know the answer to that question? Then we talk more about why they thought they needed to ask someone else instead of drawing from within.
Absolutely. I mean, that was definitely a big part of my training was about, refraining from self-disclosure, which can be in the form of answering a direct inquiry. And I thought that, that took some adjustment for me just because of, kind of the paradigm that I brought to it. And, I've also too had in many instances like that. And, sometimes I'll say to a client, so let me just, sometimes you have to negotiate and bargain with them. Okay, so let's say I answer this question. Then what?
Right.
And then over time, oftentimes what clients will say is, I'm going to have another question. So then if you have another question of me, then all of a sudden this time that you have worked so hard to create for yourself becomes about me than opposed to being for you. And then now we get to a dynamic that is hard to tease out. So this is an opportunity for you to practice leaning into your own experience with support. Some clients just have never had that kind of support. that's
Right.
being offered to them when they come to see you. And so some of them just, it's almost jolting to the nervous system almost. They've never had an experience like that. And so sometimes you resist it because it's so unfamiliar. You go out back into your busy life where nobody seems to care. And you know how to do that. You know how to show up for that life. Showing up for a life where someone is actually listening to you and caring about what you have to say in a meaningful way. It's just different. And so then I think these direct inquiries are oftentimes, an offshoot of that discomfort.
This is so interesting. And, the more I talk with you, the more I know that what you have is very special, and you're sharing it in a lot of ways, because you didn't really mention this, but I know you teach and you do trainings. Am I right?
That's right.
Supervision.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And all of that information is available on my website, which is www.urbanplayology.com. Again, it's www.urbanplayology.com. And again, even most of the supervisees that make their way to Urban Playology are all very interested in these questions about how to create a safe place and how to be culturally competent in bustling DC, where there's so much diversity.
Yeah, it's one of the most diverse places in the world.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And that is one of the things that's the most beautiful about it, which we're going to talk about in a future episode.
Yes, very much so looking forward to that. It will be timely.
Yeah, well, Xanthia, I wish we had more time today, because I would just love to keep talking with you. It's like a trance of listening to this beautiful way you work, and even, getting me to reflect right now about the way I work. And I hope people who are listening who are therapists are reflecting on that, and people who are listening who are not therapists but maybe thinking about what they would want therapy to be like if they were to go would really have some good food for thought here.
Thank you so much. Laura, I do want to say that one question that folks can ask is, ask your client every now and again, how would you know that our time together has been useful to you? How would you know that our time together has been useful to you? Every time I ask that question, it's just like clients are just in amazement. I actually had a couple cry because I said, no one has ever asked me anything.
Yeah, so it's a great way to think about what they even want and expect from the therapy process and what kind of change they're hoping will happen. Maybe giving themselves permission to even consider that.
And when you do that, you have, guess what? A hashtag safe space.
I love it.
You are so awesome, Sauce. I have to say that too. Thank you so much for this platform that you use to enlighten and bring peace to the folks that get to hear your podcast. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so kind, and thank you so much. So we'll finish up for now, but everyone who's listening, don't worry. I'm going to have another conversation with Xanthia soon. That's going to be, you all are just going to be hanging on every word. So look forward to that in the future. Xanthia, thanks again for being on Therapy Chat today.
Thank you for having me, Laura. I look forward to our next conversation.
Me too.
Thank you for listening to my interview with Xanthia Johnson. I really enjoy the way she describes her work, and I know that she is doing great things in DC. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to speak with Xanthia again. We really clicked, and I feel like there's a lot we can talk about. So until next time, please remember to visit iTunes so you can subscribe and leave a rating and review. When you subscribe, you'll receive the latest episodes directly to your device. Once again, thank you so much for listening. I'm grateful to each and every one of you. Take care. Thanks again to Lesley University for sponsoring today's episode. At Lesley University, you'll receive state-of-the-art training in clinical mental health counseling that integrates mind-body behavioral health, trauma studies, school counseling, and social justice advocacy.
Lesley University's graduate programs innovate across disciplines, from clinical mental health counseling specialties to pioneering coursework in expressive therapies, giving you the perspective to heal the whole person. Lesley University was the first graduate school in the U.S. to train professionals in the emerging field of expressive therapies. Today, Lesley's program is the largest of its kind and remains at the forefront of innovation. Lesley University's Cambridge location is a springboard to field placement opportunities where you'll put your learning into practice. You'll work in clinics, schools, and community organizations alongside practitioners and activists who are revolutionizing the field of mental health counseling. Discover master's and PhD programs at lesley.edu/mental-health.
Thank you for listening to the Therapy Chat Podcast with Laura Reagan, LCSW-C. For more information, visit Laura's website at www.laurareaganlcswc.com.